Welcome to Vancouver Business Network, where entrepreneurs learn, network, and grow. I am Roger Killen, the organizer. Our weekly workshop for entrepreneurs is brought to you by TELUS Business, the fastest and most reliable pure fiber broadband network in Metro Vancouver. Our speaker is John Newenberg. John is an award-winning business coach who has worked with hundreds of clients in three primary areas: business, personal growth, and accountability. In an earlier life, John was the president of the BC Liquor Stores with sales of about $3 billion. Before that, John was an executive with a national menswear retailer. My fellow Vancouver Business Network members and most welcome guests, it's time for you to put your hands together and give John Newenberg the welcome that he deserves.
Thank you. But tonight I want to talk about presentations that motivate, inform, and inspire. The only reason, John Kennedy said, the only reason to give a talk is to change the world. The only reason to give a talk is to change the world, and that's my goal for tonight, is to change the worlds we live in. So, hey, have you ever seen a lousy presentation?
Oh, yeah.
It's a rhetorical question. It's kind of a dumb question, actually, isn't it? But it is. Now is the time for a presentation makeover. First, hey, if you're interested in any of this, John at W5 Coaching, I'm happy to send this content to you. Feel free to send me an email tomorrow or tonight, and I'll be happy to send it along. So let's have a presentation makeover. Wouldn't you agree 95% of presentations suck? They really do, don't they? You know what? I'm sorry, I'm exaggerating. It's actually about 99% suck. Why? Because they're long, they're boring, they're nothing but bullet points, they're hierarchical. And you know why we do that? Is because the same problem as the way the Yellow Pages used to work. Remember how Peter would have Peter's Plumbing, and Peter, the Yellow Pages sales guy, go and see Peter the plumber, and then go see Bob, and Bob said, well, I got to be bigger than Peter, so, you know, make my ad bigger than Peter's. And but Bob wouldn't know anything about how to do the ad, and he said, well, just make it like Peter's. And who's the ad salesman's customer? Peter. Who's Peter's customers? The people needing plumbing, right? And so the only reason that we all see these long hierarchical presentations is because we think that's the only way it's done, because everybody does it badly. And so my hope tonight is that I'll show you a way that could be better. So have a look at these two examples. A couple of geniuses, couple of major players in the software world. On the left, we see Bill Gates' version. On my left, it's Bill Gates' version. On the far left, you're right, you'll see Steve Jobs' version, who's generally considered one of the premier all-time best presenters. What do you see that's different? What in the world is Bill Gates talking about? Can anybody tell me? What about Steve Jobs? What's he talking about? So it's clear, it's obvious, it's patently clear what the difference is. And so let's make the world a better place. We're going to do that. This guy, John Medina, wrote a book. It's awesome. Let me recommend it to you. He's got 12 brain rules. Today we're going to do 2. So brain rule number 4, we don't pay attention to boring things. That's a newscast, right? We don't pay attention to boring things. Why is that? Because about 200,000 years ago is about when we shifted and started to adopt a more male or mankind kind of posture. About 50,000 years ago, we started interacting. It was about only 6,000 years ago that we actually started to have language. So up until that time, up until 6,000 years ago, the only thing we ever thought about anything is the 4 Fs. Fight, flight, feed, and one more F that I'm not going to say. Can I eat it? Will it eat me? Can I mate? Have I seen it before? And so why do some ideas stick? Why do some ideas stick? Stories. Facts tell, stories sell. Facts tell, stories sell. Look at these people here. Look at these little kids. How old are those kids? Can you see how enraptured, how engaged they are with the story they're being told? How old are these kids?
3 months.
3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Can they speak?
No.
Not a word. Can they evoke emotion?
Yeah.
Absolutely, with clear and vivid tones. And so emotions is what connects us to stories. Here's an example of the indigenous people. I think this is in Australia, and they're able to communicate their history through the centuries. In fact, the indigenous people of Haida Gwaii, Queen Charlotte's, were able to talk about their history. In about 1700, decades and decades ago, there was a massive wave that killed the forest and killed many of their tribe. And researchers have gone back and using tree rings have established that it happened in 1701. And they communicated that story through storytelling for hundreds of years through the power of story. So here's why it matters. So the left brain, that's the logic side of the brain. That's where facts exist. That's where words exist. The right brain, that's where emotions exist. That's where colors exist. The left brain is short-term memory. The right brain is long-term memory. So here's the trick. If you want someone to remember something you want them to get, you got to hook it to a story, because stories are about emotion, and emotion is what gets remembered. Facts tell, stories sell. You want to hook it to an emotion, connect it to a story. So let me give you an example of this. Who from the audience wants to offer some help here? Okay, Elena, what I'm going to ask you to do is, what I want you to do is to call out the color, but not the word. So the first one is?
Yellow.
The first?
Stands out to me the most.
Okay, what I'm asking is, what's the first on the top left? What's that word?
Green.
Okay, what color is it?
Green.
What's the next one?
Red.
And after that?
And red. And no, blue.
Yes, and what's then?
Red.
What's the color?
White.
What's the next one?
Blue.
What's the color? I want to know the
Lime
color.
green. Lime green. And red and fuchsia and brown and yellow and blue.
What you're witnessing is a contest your brain is having, because your brain is, one part of it is trying to read the word, and the other part of it is trying to read out the color. And it's one fight is saying to the left side of your brain, don't read the word, say the color. And so it's an example or evidence of a left and right brain. By the way, just on a different note about that, the brain can't do a don't, it can only do a do. The brain can't do a don't, it can only do a do. So I'm going to ask you to pay attention, focus on with me on something I'm going to ask you to do, okay? Don't think of a polar bear. So why does this matter? The only way you can not think of a polar bear is to think of an elephant, or think of an apple, or anything else apart from the polar bear. So the brain can't do a don't, it can only do a do. So when you're focused on the thing that's keeping you awake at night, what are you thinking about? The thing you're worried about. And you're telling your brain that that's what you want more of. Sleep, sleep, that's actually what you want more of. And so if you turned around and instead of focused on the thing that's causing you worry, and instead said, what could I do tomorrow that would cause the worry to go away? Focus on that thing, you can actually go and do it. When you're focused on worry, you're actually focused on the thing you don't want, and the brain doesn't know how to deal with that. So it just gives you more. So don't think of a polar bear. You can tell a story, the same story can be scaled for 5, 15, or 45 minutes. Steve Jobs is a famous example of this. This is the commencement speech he gave at Stanford. This is the one that he said, hey, I'm just going to tell you 3 little stories. That's it, just 3 stories. And he ended this one really famously with the idea of stay hungry, stay foolish. So today I just want to tell you a little story. The first one is love and loss. The other one's about death. And he's only had 16 million views. The guy's a storyteller. He knows how to get your attention. Paul Simon We celebrate, one of his songs, celebrate the birth of Jesus on Christmas Day. Wisdom is old, the Koran is old, the Bible is old. It's the greatest story ever told. And he's only had 12 Grammys and 100 million record sales. So he knows the power of story. So we have a 10-minute rule. After 10 minutes, your brain goes dead. You get bored. And so in your presentations, every 10 minutes, you got to shake it up. That's the first thing you take away. You only got 10 minutes of people's attention, and then you want to change and do something different. So here's what I want you to do. To think about there is a way to connect these 9 dots using 4 straight lines without lifting your pen or pencil. I'll give you a minute to think about that. 4 straight lines. Connect the dots without picking up your pencil. Is there a way you can do that? So who knows the expression, you have to think outside the box? This is where it comes from. This is what it means. Because if you don't, what we think of is we tend to imagine that we have to stay within the confines of the box, of the framework I gave you. And so to think outside the box is a way of original thinking.
Is that like trying to be aware of your assumptions?
Yeah, it would be similar about that. You're testing your assumptions. So should we be aware of your assumptions? Should you recognize when you're making an assumption? We don't always recognize we're making assumptions. When I go through a green light, I'm assuming the person with the red light is going to stop. That's usually a safe assumption. But your point of testing your assumptions is always a good one.
It seems to sometimes people get competitive, or they want to. The undercurrent is that I want to be smart, so they rush into something.
So, and as a result of making their assumptions, got it. Let me offer you the rule of thirds. 1/3 of the time that you have available to do your talk, 1/3 of it should be in preparation, thinking, writing, and sketching. 1/3 is actually building the slides, and it's thought by Nancy Duarte, who wrote a book called Slideology, which is awesome. Let me recommend the book to you. She would recommend that a presentation that has 30 slides takes 90 hours to do. 30 slides takes 90 hours. The first 30 hours you would spend thinking about sketching and making the presentation. Then you make the slides, and then you rehearse. Who has spent 90 hours doing a 30 slide? Yeah, for sure. Okay. When starting your story and starting your slides, start here. Start at the end. What do you want the audience to conclude as a result of your story, as a result of your presentation? Get clear about that first, because that, in fact, then becomes the guide, the map of how you're going to tell your story. Start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say. Patterns matter. Anybody can make that out? How about if I turn it into a pattern? And now it makes sense. There's an annoying version of a pattern. So patterns matter. Design, don't decorate. And what that means is use a specific and set number of fonts, sizes, and colors. Themes or patterns, the human mind is very conditioned to looking for patterns. And it's very disruptive if you jar that pattern or that rhythm. When thinking about how you construct the images, think about this example here that's stuck in the middle. And let me offer you a tip from photographers called the rule of thirds. And so when photographers frame their shot, they think about this rule of thirds, and the point of focus is in one of those intersections, like this. And that same shot now looks interesting. And Apple, which get a lot about how design worked, used this as when they posted Steve Jobs' death. So they get the idea of the rule of thirds. Or here's another one of Vancouver that's really beautifully composed. The foreground, downtown, and the mountains, telling the story of Vancouver. Yes?
John, do I assume that you make these images, but there's no grid lines on them.
Of course, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but lots of cameras actually have the capacity to put that image and superimpose it. So when you're actually framing the shot, you use this grid, but you wouldn't do it in a normal kind of slide presentation. But keep that thought in mind that the best images are composed in a way where the focus of the image is one of the cross points.
So on all the pictures, it was obvious how they use the rule of thirds and what attracts your eye. But on the previous picture that you showed, it was like downtown Vancouver with mountains in the background. I don't understand what the main focal point of.
In this case, it isn't it's the 3 layers, the 3 levels. So in the foreground, you see Queen Elizabeth Park, which is where the photographer was standing. The middle layer is the view of downtown and the buildings, and then the magnificent of the top layer. Yeah, it isn't so much in this case about the crosshairs, but in fact, and here the photographer was going for that sense of joy and leaping and fun and over exaggerated. You see the horizon is way below the normal typical. If your horizon line is right in the middle of the photograph, it's boring by definition. So either make the ground 2/3 or make the sky 2/3, because then you've got a point of emphasis. And so the same thing applies when you're doing slide presentations. You want to engage the audience, you want to hook the audience, you want them to that your image evokes something for the audience. So brain rule number 10 is vision trumps all other senses. So vision uses half the brain's resources. 50% of your brain's power is to process images. 50% of your brain's power is to process images. And so when we communicate, it's thought that text represents about 7%. That tone of voice is around 38%, and body language is around 55%. When we email, what's available to us? 7%. When you're trying to solve a problem through email, it is the equivalent of throwing hand grenades over the fence. We've built emoticons as a kind of a proxy for saying, hey, I'm telling a joke. It's okay. You can't solve a problem that started out of email by email. If you get on the phone, at least you can communicate through your tone of voice. Can I have Yvonne, come here for a second, okay? I want to prove this point to you. I'm going to do something really rude for a minute, okay? I love you. These sparkling eyes. So what did I say? Thanks. What did I say? What's wrong with those words? I was menacing. I growled. My tone of voice, my body language is menacing, and you knew which was the message I was delivering. And so in any time that you can, you're always better off if you need to solve a problem or resolve some conflict or engage in any kind of communication, do it as best you can face-to-face. When an audience sees the word bird, about 72 hours later, 10% of that audience will remember that word. That same audience, if you show them an image, about 65% of that audience will remember that image. If you want to be remembered. In fact, we don't even read words as words. Have you ever seen one of those things where they take out all the vowels and you still can process that? Do you know why that's going on? Because we process words as images. And so we don't need to see the whole word to know what the word is. And that's a proof of that concept. So let's have some presentation makeovers. Let's do some examples. So on the left, we've got the standard. On my left, you've got the standard bullet point hierarchical standard. Or on the other example, on the right-hand side, we've got something that's got one memorable point, hook, that is trying to make with the image of Einstein. How do you like that image? The one on the left has got so much garbage on it, is so confusing, so unclear, and yet the one on the right makes evident the point you want to make. How much does it cost for a slide? They're free. Why use one when you can use 5? They're free. How many bikes were sold on the left? Do you even know what they're trying to tell you? Does sex still sell in advertising? Do you remember what that slide said? No worries, it was boring. Images sell. So numbers need context. If you're just going to put a bunch of numbers up there, that doesn't mean anything to people. But how about, I'm going to give you a graph that shows you what's happening to the world population. 2 graphs, it's nice and clear, it's an image, right? How about if I do it this way? Oh, now I can see what's going to happen. So numbers need context, a framework to help us think about it. How about the world's ice? You know that 95% of the world's ice is in Antarctica? How about if I show it to you this way? Oh, wow, that's way more impactful. So I'm going to offer you 5 different ways that some of the people that are highly respected, how they do design. So there's the Takahashi method, which is where they use words and create words in massive, like 170-point font. So big text is visuals, and that's the main message on each slide, and that's what it looks like in Japanese. As you can see, it's clean, striking, and remarkable. Guy Kawasaki has a design method that he calls the 10-20-30 method. So it's 10 slides lasting 20 minutes with no less than 30-point font. So the smallest size font is 30 points. And he talks, there's a cute little video that I'm going to recommend to you. He says he's got an algorithm for the size of font you should be using. Take the age of the oldest person in the room and divide by 2. I'm 65. That gives you 32. That's the smallest font to use. He's a venture capitalist. And so he gets lots and lots of these presentations that are, you know, hour-long presentations, boring as hell. And so that's why he wants it in 20 minutes. And as your kids, it's going to take, you're using a Windows laptop, it's going to take you 40 minutes to work with a projector. So it's mainly used to get agreement around venture capital. Because if you think I suck, at least you'll be able to track my progress and know that you're 8 slides into the 10-slide presentation. I've only got to endure 2 more. And that's what it looks like. Brief, digestible, and succinct. There's a guy named Lessing who does a style, it's brilliant, where he actually flashes the slides at the same pace he talks. And he's got it down to a perfect rhythm, perfect synchronicity. He's got some TED Talks that I'm going to recommend to you. And I kind of borrow a little of his slides. You can see that slides on the kind of presentations I do don't last more than 10 seconds, 30 seconds, tops. So Roger was kidding me a little bit. There's probably like 160 slides, and how do you do that in an hour's presentation? Well, none of them are going to be on the screen very long. So it's a dynamic, exciting, and stimulating. And then Seth Godin's got a style that it's all about images and not about text because of the idea of image superiority. Images are a much more powerful way of communicating. So make slides that reinforce your words that aren't there to act as your script. The slide is there to support your idea. The point of your slide is to say, what is the best possible image I can use to support the point I want to make? And so that's what his style looks like. And Steve Jobs, who's, you know, deemed to be the master of this, had these, you know, massive wall, 40-foot tall slides with the gradient and single words, sometimes in like 200 point, and the words themselves then became an image. No bullets, ever. And that's what it looked like. So who's got a question or a comment or a thought? I'll stop here for a second, mainly so I can get some water. I'm going to ask for questions one more time, so they're usually best if there's actually a few questions and they're kind of provocative. Camille?
So just to recap, you said keep the font the same throughout the presentation?
So Camille's question is what to do about the font. If what I'm recommending is that you use no more than 3 sizes of font and 2 styles of font. And that if your heading is 60 point, every single heading is 60 point. If the second point is 40, every time it's 40. And if your smallest is 30, it's always the same. And that you're using not more than 2 styles of font, and one's better. Questions about that?
I have a different question. If I wanted to bring any kind of interaction additional to PowerPoint to the stage, what would you recommend to me?
Like video and that kind of thing? Is that what you mean?
Video or action of some sort. Did you work with any other?
I use a lot of video in the kind of presentations that I do. Given our situation here today, I was asked not to use videos, but I have a lot that I would have loved to have been able to use. Props are great. I'm not a great guy for props, but if you can make props work, go for it.
Would it be good if you use a design element that's consistent throughout the entire?
Absolutely. That's the whole thing about patterns, right? Our brain is very good at detecting patterns, and it gets very annoyed when a pattern is disrupted.
So the purpose of branding, like when I should say with a person, you want to say, let's say my name is James Styler, but I want to use my initials in the bottom right-hand corner in a unique font on every single slide so that it's constantly jumping under.
Yeah, so the question is, should you have your own brand in the bottom corner? And you see in some cases I do, in some cases I don't. You could get any 5 people in a room and have a debate about that.
So just do it.
Whatever works best for you. Other people would give you different advice.
Okay.
So this is Seth Godin. If there's any 5 slides, 6 slides that you take out of this presentation, let me urge you to take these 5 rules. So number 1, no slide should ever have more than 6 words. Period. No slide ever has more than 6 words. If you need 12, use 2 slides. They're cheap. Never less than 30-point font. So here's an example of the US military, and this is a slide they were using that they used in all seriousness. And the general at the time said, when we understand the slide, we'll have won the war. The slide's more complicated than the war. How can anybody process what in the world's happening on that thing?
Especially if you're trying to talk to the opposition.
Absolutely. So this is what 12-point font looks like. And next to that, 30-point font is tiny. If you're using 12-point font, a 100% rule is that your slides are your script. So no cheesy images or sound effects. No one's office looks like that. Have you ever worked in an office where that's what the people looked like? And that's how they presented themselves? The only way he can get away with this is this guy from South Park. He can have all the cheesy poofs he wants. So no dissolve spins or crazy transitions. Don't you just want to yell at the guy who relies on transitions or all these gimmicky kinds of things? They don't really add any value. They're great for the designers, great for the programmers, but they don't really present as credible. So let's use way more images and much less text. Way more images, much less text. So I'm going to tell you the story of the Gulf oil spill. I'm going to break it down into these 6 sections, each with 4 subcomponents. Are you ready for this story? Are you excited about this story? How about if I showed you this? That's a gut punch. Want to go swimming? This guy did. He's a reporter looking for the story. Now you'll listen to what I might have to say about it. It's an example of how images are much, much, much more impactful than whatever text you might want to say. And now you'll want to listen to what I might have to say because I'm going to give that meaning. I'm going to give it context. And so, like Roger said, I'm the star of the show. So no handouts. We write at 22 words a minute. We speak at 105 words a minute. We listen at 155. Do you know what that tells us? Why we're listening faster than you can talk? Why we're getting ready to answer while you're still talking? We don't listen for understanding, we listen to respond. It's because of this phenomenon. We can process faster than you can speak. And we read at about 300 words a minute. So if you're giving a handout, or if your presentation is entirely words, you know what's going to happen? They're going to read ahead because they can read faster than you can talk. And besides which, you're kind of boring. So no handouts. So every presentation ought to have 3 versions. So first is the version the audience sees. The second is the version with your notes and the scripts and what you might like to say. And then the third is the handout. And the handout is given only after the presentation. Well, I'm thinking about it. Why am I standing on this side of the stage and not on that side of the presentation? Anybody want to hazard a guess about that? It's not an accident. How do we read?
Left to right.
Left to right. And where's the anchor point?
Right.
Left, top left.
The left. And so you, as the speaker, are the anchor point. They read and come back, read and come back, read and come back. So you always want to be standing on this side of the presentation.
I have different understanding of things.
Okay.
And we relate more to what's on the right than to what is on the right. So on the left. So if we want to focus, we're going to bring it to the right. Our client.
Okay. I have a different theory, but
Yeah,
I don't want to argue with you. Sure.
But- According to psychology, each eye reflects both sides of the brain. So when you're going back and forth, you're using the whole brain.
All right. There's another good theory.
That's why Asians have like sidewalks are like this, because as you turn a corner, you're actually seeing more stuff.
Don't have any experience with that, so I can't comment. Hey, let's take a look at the example of one of the pros. We've got the MacBook Air, the world's thinnest notebook. And so here's how a standard engineer might present that. A lot of data, a lot of features, not a lot of meaning and not a lot of context. This engineer went crazy and got a battery icon. Wow. But how does the master do it? I wonder what's in that envelope. It must be kind of cool. Look at how big it is on the stage. Oh my gosh, I want one. Now it's got magic. It's got story. So isn't it time for a presentation makeover? Look at Bill Gates. So the original version I showed you is from about 1995. Go and take a look at some of his TEDx talks or TED Talks today. The man is brilliant. And he uses props. He's a very, very good speaker. His presentations are much, much stronger, and the images that he uses in the PowerPoint is much more compelling. This is what the old version looked like. This is what the new version looked like. And so if even Bill Gates can do a presentation makeover, isn't it time for a presentation makeover for you? That's all I got. Who's got some questions or comment, or let's just throw it up for some discussion.
When you said no dissolve the transition, crazy transition, no transition at all? Or
What's the point of a transition? If you're going to illustrate and want to make a point about a speed of a car or a boat or something like that, you can use that to illustrate that point, but they're a distraction for the most part. And so that example I gave you is an exaggerated example, but you know, we're all waiting for the 3 to come up and then the thing to spin. That's, you know, it's not very compelling. So if you want to use it as a single example, as something to jar or to do a pattern interrupt, that'd be awesome. If you're using every slide to do a transition, then you're focusing not on your story, but on pyro techniques.
for example, the presentation that I'm talking about, that's the title at top and then points at the bottom, and then transitions to my next title and points at the bottom.
Well, let me just urge you not to use that style of presentation, period. Don't have a title and then 3 bullet points coming up one at a time. That pattern will get old in a hurry. It's like, how long is this going to take? Steve had a question.
How about, what are the negative aspects of including your audience as part of a learning process?
So in today's context, it's a little bit difficult because of so Steve's question, just to pardon me, Steve's question is, how about the idea of engaging an audience? In my view, it's best if the audience is engaged. It isn't always possible. In a room this size with this many people, it's relatively easy. In a room with 5,000 people, it's much, much, much harder to do. And so the size of the group matters. The intention matters. If you're doing comedy, it's a one-way delivery. If you're doing some teaching or educating, then it's best if it's an engaging two-way discussion.
I guess if you did use a big audience, you'd have to have a bigger prize. Someone come up on stage and,
Oh, a bigger attraction, sure. Yeah. You have a question.
I don't have a question, but I just want to comment on something that I said earlier about, like, sometimes, you want to solve a problem and you have to email. It took back and forth less than an hour. And finally, I said to him, either you call me or the deal is off. And he called me, and just in less than a minute, everything was solved. But,
so your comment is that an example of where email was just making the problem worse, and making a phone call smoothed the way much quicker. And so it's scary to do, by the way, because the email, the tension in the email is starting to rise, and now you have to pick up the phone. But it's your best possible chance. Just tell yourself this: the best possible chance you have of solving the problem is if you pick up the phone. If you want to just continue the debate and continue the lobbying, just continue with email. So it depends what you want as an outcome. Roger.
Can you speculate where presentation skills are going?
Wow. Roger wants me to repeat the question. Can I guess, speculate about where would I think presentation skills are going? I don't know quite the context of that, but what I would say is this, that we are in the persuasion business, all of us. If we're in sales, we're in the persuasion business. And so the degree that you can improve your presentation skills, the degree that you can improve your persuasion skills is the degree to which you can enjoy success. And that's not just if you're a salesperson, but in any endeavor. Have you ever tried to negotiate with a 2-year-old? What about asking for a date? Those are all persuasion skills.
Have we got that presentation on that?
Not for me. I'm engaged.
Trial and error.
Oh, okay.
So, Roger, did you have a thought about that? Is there something you were thinking about?
It was really in relation to technology.
20
years ago, we didn't have PowerPoint. We used acetate.
Yeah.
And now that PowerPoint is maybe superseded, where is this going?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of there is a bunch of online. Plexi is an example of one. There are some kind of competing. I don't see any of them none of them have gained any momentum. It's still Keynote or PowerPoint. It's sort of a universal standard at the moment. But I would take the point that every industry has been disrupted. I wouldn't know how to describe the disruption yet. We were talking about Uber before, speaking of the taxi business. So Steve has another question. Steve, you know what? I'm going to hold on because I'm going to check and make sure someone else might have a question or a thought. Right.
I do event planners.
Right.
My point with my clients is going there to show my creative ideas.
Right.
And for the last slide, I put the price.
Right.
And sometimes they start to hushing me.
Right.
Go to the last one because they like the ideas, but they want how much cost.
Right.
How can I manage that to avoid this kind of hushing or pushing me in this kind of presentation? Because as Roger asked about the point part of
Sure.
the future, I use to do some videos to
Sure.
present my ideas.
Yeah.
Anyway, the cost go to the end of the video or the presentation at all.
Yeah.
So how can I manage this?
Ask me how much coaching is.
Cool.
Ask me.
I don't know.
Ask me how much coaching. How much is coaching, John?
How much is coaching?
So Raza, just so I can help you best, would it be okay if I asked you a few questions? What just happened? When you're asked about price, you can't answer in that moment because, as Warren Buffett says, never describe price until, never give price, never quote price until you've described value. And you can't, if I were to tell you that coaching is $2,500 a month, you would look at that and think, well, that's crazy. There's no way it can be worth that much. And yet if I do it my way, I can prove to you that it's worth that much. So you have to do it on your terms, on your agenda. Now, you're going to have situations, this is way off, this is sales presentation, but you're going to have situations where they push back and they'll say, no, that's just how much is it? So then what you want to do is kind of a bread box answer. So coaching is going to go anywhere from about $1,000 a month to about $5,000 a month. I don't know where you fit on that scale. So just so I can help you best, would it be okay if I ask you a few questions? And so in my experience, 95 out of 100 would accept the first answer. 5 out of 100 push back a little bit and have the second answer prepared. Do not quote your prices until you've described value. Okay, so you can do that in a number of different ways and be polite about it.
Could it be possible the presentation is too long too?
Raz's presentation? Possibly. But Raz, I'm going to give you some different advice as well. So the people that are the organizers of these kinds of events are usually really strong-minded, powerful people used to getting their own way. And they don't like to be told. The price is. So you're way better off if you provide options. So what I suggest you do is package your event with a good, better, best option. The good option, the better option, and the best option. And the way that you want to do it is when you get to the end, you lay out and say, I've got 3 options. Now, based on our conversation, that budget package, the low-end package, isn't really going to work for you. So of the remaining 2, the good or the better, which one fits best with what you're thinking? Now, you see what I've set up over here? It's not a yes, no, it's an either or. And I'm happy either way. And the most important thing to do when you ask that question, don't do anything. Don't say a word until you get a response. And the other way you do it is, hey, so based on our conversation, that upper end, the luxury package really isn't going to work for the budget that we've been talking about. So of the remaining 2, the good or the better, which one do you like best? So I have a gold, silver, bronze, silver, gold kind of package. And then you can, and then you're in a place where you can have a conversation about their expectations and how you might fit that instead of saying it's going to be 10,000 and that's the only place you got left to go. Does that help you?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Provide options. That's the big clue. We're good?
I think,
Yeah, another quick question is, I guess, I noticed with a lot of your PowerPoints, you use a lot of contrast. You know, like background is black, lots of white print. Is that something you want to maintain as consistent, like a lot of contrast?
Well, it happens to fit my brand, black and red on white. And so you'll notice that the slides all have that consistent color throughout. My standard palette is black, red, and white. So that's part of the rhythm, part of having a pattern. And it subconsciously it supports the idea of the brand.
And you also mentioned Bill Gates, you know, some of his TED Talks. Can you recommend any other TED Talks that are good?
Just about all of them.
So as far as presentation?
Which are great. From a presentation point of view, I don't know if there's any that really come to mind. TED has a philosophy that it isn't really about the PowerPoint, it's about the speaker. It's what Roger was talking about. They want the focus to be on the person. But Bill Gates has got a little pull. And he has some money and probably made a donation. And he has a message that he wants to sell. Steve.
I think we might be missing something because webinars are tremendous market. And if anybody has defined a niche in their presentation on PowerPoint, they can use it on a webinar.
Huge. So I'll give you a personal example of that. In 2004, when I started as a coach, my marketplace was anywhere I could drive to. So basically, you know, an hour's drive. Today, I have clients literally anywhere English is spoken. That's literally true. So South Africa, Australia, I don't have any in New Zealand, all throughout the United States. And LinkedIn and social marketing has made that possible as well. And Zoom webinars. Yeah. So just as a kind of underline the point that Steve was making. So I think we're going to wrap up here. Roger, thanks a lot.
Okay, John. Can you share your box with me?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can share the same box. So I gotta rise up a little bit. John, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Pleasure.
Presentation skills are critical for entrepreneurs. The better we are, the better business that we're going to build. It's just that simple. And of course, I want to thank our friends from TELUS. Thank you so much for making this reproduction possible. Good night, all. Thank you once more, TELUS. Say thank you, TELUS.
TELUS, that's awesome. Thanks a lot.
Way to go. Way to go, TELUS.